All right, well, as we continue on our study, our Wednesday night study of the parables of Jesus from the Gospel of Luke, tonight we find ourselves in Luke chapter 12, as we will be looking at the parable of the watchful servants. I struggle with how to outline this because it's really just kind of the parable, and then you talk about the parable and you talk about how the application of the parable. So that's kind of how I've outlined it, the explanation of the parable and the application of the parable. And so I haven't really tried to get too cute or too creative with my outline. It's just pretty straightforward. Let's read the parable, and then we'll back up and talk about it. So I'm in verse 35 of Luke chapter 12. Jesus speaking says, "Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning, and you yourselves be like men who wait for their master when he will return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, will find watching. Assuredly, I say to you that he will gird himself and have them sit down to eat, and will come and serve them. And if he should come in the second watch or come in the third watch and find them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." All right, let's talk about this for just a little bit. We have, in this parable, we really sort of have two parables. At least we have two images or two illustrations that Jesus uses to make his point. What are those two? What's the first one? Yeah, the master is going away to a wedding, presumably the wedding ceremony and the wedding banquet that would follow that. And then he's returning. His servants of his house are basically left in charge of the house till he gets back. They don't know exactly when their master is coming back, but they're expected to be ready, be watching, and be ready to greet the master when he comes back. And the second illustration that Jesus uses is what? A thief breaking in the house to steal. And Jesus said, if the owner of the house would have known when the thief was coming, he would have been ready. So that's the two illustrations. So the imagery that Jesus uses, maybe the thief part we get. Maybe that kind of makes sense to us. But really the master going away to a wedding feast is kind of lost on us in 21st century America, because if we go to a wedding, usually if we're guys, we fuss about that for a month or two before our wife finally drags us to it and makes us wear, uncomfortable clothes, and we go and we sit. We find a corner that hopefully there's nobody else sitting in, or if there is maybe one other guy that we can talk about, the Thunder, who won last night, by the way. And we sit there and we eat our cake and we drink our punch and we wait till finally enough time has passed that we can drag our wife away from the wedding. That's how we celebrate a wedding. And the whole thing maybe takes a couple of hours if you're lucky. That's not the way they did it in, first century Judea, where Jesus is telling this parable. In those days, the wedding was very unpredictable as far as the timing of it. Even when the wedding took place was a little bit unpredictable, because the groom had to go away and he had to prepare sort of a honeymoon house for the bride. And when it was ready and the father of the bride said, "Yeah, this is suitable for you to take my daughter to live in," then the wedding would take place, and the groom would go and he would get the bride, and the wedding would take place. And the wedding usually lasted 7 days. sometimes even longer, but 7 days was pretty standard. And then you had the banquet after that could last another 7 days. So it's not as though this guy was left and he's coming back in a couple of hours. This guy's probably gone for a couple of weeks or so, and he leaves the servants without any real clue as to, well, this is when the master will be back. Just that they know he's coming back, and he expects them to be ready when he returns, and they're supposed to welcome him in. When he knocks on the door, he shouldn't have to wait at the door for them to, get up, get out of bed, light a lamp, and all that. He expects them to have the lights burning. He expects them to be dressed, ready to go, open the door, and sit down and serve him. That's the expectation there. Now, as far as the thief, maybe that is a little, maybe that communicates a little bit better to us in 21st century America. What's the best way to avoid being robbed? Do what? Get a big dog or a big gun, right? Point is, when is the time to prepare your house for a potential robbery? Before it gets robbed. I mean, it's not really going to do you. If you come home from work and someone has busted in your house and stolen all your valuables and ransacked your house, it's not going to do you a lot of good to say, well, doggone, I better do something. I might get robbed. The time to have taken care of that was before that. So the point that Jesus seems to be making in this is that the time to take care of spiritual matters is before the return. Now, what's he talking about here? What's this parable about? Let's get that out of the way first. What? I thought I heard somebody say something, but I couldn't. She said rapture. I prefer the term the return of Christ. You could say the rapture, and this is why, because most of the time in Scripture, in the New Testament, those two events are usually tied together. There's a couple of scriptures in the New Testament that seem to indicate that maybe those take place at different times, but most of the New Testament, it's lumped together as one idea. The return of Christ, the resurrection of the saints, the being called up to meet him in the air. It's kind of one event. So if you don't agree with my eschatology, that's fine. We can talk about that another day, another lesson. But so I'm not going to say you're wrong by saying the rapture. I would just say the return of Christ, because that's what he's talking about, the master returning. And so that seems to be the most straightforward reading to me. So in the parable here, he says that like wise servants of the master, we're to have our lamps burning and our waist girded. So what do we make of that? First of all, let's talk about the lamps burning. In order to have the lamp burning when the master returns, what do you have to do? Do what? So do I wait until the master, I see him coming and I go, oh, here he comes, let's light the lamp. You gotta have and it burning, right? I gotta have the oil in the lamp, I gotta have the wicks trimmed, and I gotta have it burning. In other words, I'm not gonna wait till I see my master coming before I light the lamp. I'm gonna light it ahead of time. I'm gonna have it burning and ready to go. Now, the girding your waist, again, this is an illustration that is sort of a little bit lost on us in 21st century America, because, guys, we wear what? We wear pants, right? We wear blue jeans. Even on Sunday, Even if, Brother Mark, he may not wear blue jeans on Sunday morning, but he's got on pants of some sort, right? Not so back then, not so in those days. You wore a tunic of a type thing, almost like a long night shirt, and then you wore a robe over that. Now, have you ever tried to, let me see how I want to ask this question. Ladies, because I'm going to assume most men haven't worn a gown or a dress. And if you have, I don't want to know about it tonight. Ladies, have you ever tried to run in a gown or in a dress? Well, I'm assuming, does it work out very well? I mean, are you going to run the 40-yard dash in a skirt? Probably. Huh? You saw a girl do that one time. Yeah. You're stealing my illustration. Stop it. We're getting there. I'm a preacher. I take a long time to tell a story. That's how I stretch this lesson out for 45 minutes, see? Yeah. So, but you're right. I mean, that is right. So it's not very practical to try to run or fight in a battle or do any kind of activity in a night shirt and a robe. So what do? Well, some wise fellow, maybe it was Levi Strauss, I don't know, whoever it was, invented this neat stuff called blue jeans, and it works really good. And you can work in it, you can fight in it, you can run in it. But they didn't have pants in those days. So what they did was they kind of made their own makeshift pants. And so what they would do is if I got ready to run or to work or to hurry in some way, fight a battle maybe, I would reach down and I would grab the back part of my robe and I would pull it up through my legs like this. I've made myself kind of a giant diaper at this point, And then you've got this belt that ties your robe together, so you can cinch that up. And now I've sort of made myself a pair of short pants out of this robe and tunic. And so when you read about someone having their waist girded, that's what it's talking about. It means I can't run, I can't work, I can't fight in this robe, but I can pull it up, cinch it around me. Now I've got it out of the way, and I'm essentially wearing a pair of pants, or at least short pants, so to speak. And so that's the idea of the waist being girded there. Now, if we were to change this from first century Judea to 21st century Oklahoma, and I was trying to do an illustration of being ready, how might I change that? I wouldn't say, keep your lamps burning and your waist girded. What would I say? Have your clothes on and the lights on, turn your lights on and put your clothes on and get ready for whatever's happening, right? Sure. So when I was, when Lisa and I first got married, we lived and I pastored in Tennessee. My family, my parents, they lived in Texas, in Waxahachie, Texas. And so it was about a 12-hour drive from where we lived in East Tennessee. It was even further. It was probably 15 hours. So by the time the boys came along, it was about a 15-hour drive to get to Waxahachie to see Mama and Papa. And so we would call. Now what we found was that kids at that age would travel better at night because there's this thing called the magic car seat. You strap your baby in there and they'll just sleep the whole way. And so we would travel at night. I would call my dad and I would say, hey, we're coming such and such day. It was usually maybe on a Sunday night. Like if I was taking a week's vacation or something, we're leaving Sunday after church, so we'll be on the road around 7. 15 hours from that puts it somewhere, sometime in the either early morning or middle of the night. If we were able to get away Sunday afternoon, maybe it was, maybe it'd be middle of the night, maybe midnight, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. You just never knew. And that's the thing. When you're traveling that far, you can't say with certainty. Now, we're going to be there between 2:45 and 3 a.m. in the morning. Like, you just don't know that. And so what you say is, we're coming sometime tonight. Well, I always kind of thought and even hoped maybe a little bit that my mom and dad, who were, by that time were already older than I am now, would have gone on to bed and gone to sleep, and then whenever we rang the doorbell, they would get up and they would come let us in, and not usually anyway. Usually they were sitting there in the living room with the lights on, had the porch light on, the driveway light on. They were sitting there in the living room with the light on, and you could tell. Now, my mama, she might have dozed off, because my mama's like my wife. They don't hold their eyes open very well at night, But my dad, he'd just be sitting there and he'd be waiting, and that he's been waiting all night long after everybody else would have gone to bed. He's sitting there waiting. I think that's the image that Jesus is giving us here, that, look, long after everybody else has fallen asleep spiritually, Jesus expects his people to be awake, alert, and ready and looking for his coming. This seems to be the idea. He says even if he comes in the second or third watch, so this would be from about what time to about what time? Yeah, wee hours of the morning. So the watches typically, now there's some discussion is he using the Jewish reckoning or the Roman reckoning, but probably the idea was that it would have started, the night watches would have started at sundown. So that's about 6 in the evening. They lasted 3 hours each. So the second watch would be from 9 p.m. to about midnight. And then the third watch would be, what we would call, like graveyard shift, like from midnight till 3 in the morning. The time that everybody else would be asleep, everybody else would be in bed, you have to still be watching. And there's the spiritual application. If the Lord tarries his coming, and he's tarried it now for over 2,000 years, or right at 2,000 years, I guess, then a lot of people have given up. A lot of people have fallen asleep. A lot of people have say, Jesus isn't coming back. It's all just a myth. If he was coming back, he would have already come back. Or they say his coming is a long way off. And so they begin to slumber spiritually. But as God's people, as his servants, we can't do that. We have to be awake. We have to be alert. And there's an interesting little twist in this parable. So the master shows up, his servants greet him, and they're watching and they're ready, and the lights are burning, and their waists are girded, and they welcome him in, and they're prepared to serve him. And then what happens? He ends up serving them. So here's a neat little plot twist, and we'll talk about what that may mean in just a minute. But when the master returns and finds the servants ready for him, he in turn girds himself and serves them, is the idea. So that's the parable. We haven't talked at all about what it means, or very little, but that's kind of what the parable that Jesus is telling is. Is there questions on that? And we'll get to the meaning of it next, but questions on that's unclear that maybe we can clear up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what this means. And I think we've asked this question earlier and maybe answered it satisfactorily. What event does this parable refer to? I'm going to say it refers to the return of Christ. If you want to say the rapture, that's fine. To me, I kind of lump all of that together. And I don't split hairs over, well, is he talking about the rapture or is he talking about the return? Is he talking about, to me, it's kind of, this is one of those general parables that is talking about the events surrounding the return of Christ. What's the point of the thief illustration here? Be ready, be prepared. Be prepared for Jesus' return. So if the parable is about the return of Christ, then the point about the illustration about the thief is that we should be prepared for the return of Christ. What do we need to do to be prepared? We got to know the Lord for sure, but that's not all of it, is it? I mean, I need to be serving Him. I need to be living right. I need to be prayed up. I need to be where I need to be with Jesus every day, is the idea there. Jesus says that His return will be like a thief in the night. Implied in that is what? That the world will be ready because He's coming as a thief in the night. The world will not be prepared, will it? Now we, as believers, we're supposed to be prepared. I guess time will tell if we really are or not. But the world itself will not be prepared. They won't be. It'll be just like it was in the days of Noah when God sent the judgment by the flood. They won't be prepared, and they won't know what's on them until it's too late. And that's the way the second coming will be. When the judgment falls, that's the way it will be. So how can one be ready for the Master's return? I think we kind of talked about this. We got to have our lamp already lit for the Master's return, right? You can't wait till you see Jesus come. You can't wait and say, "Oh, here comes Jesus in the clouds. I better hit my knees and start praying." Too late then. You better look up because he's here. By the time you see Him coming, whatever decisions is locked in. At that point. It's kind of like you remember the show that used to come on? I don't think it comes on anymore. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And they'd ponder different things. Well, it could be this, could be that, and they'd say, I think it's Michael Jackson. And at that point it was Regis Philbin. I think they've had different hosts, but at that point I think it was Regis. He's like, "Is that your final answer?" And you say, "That's my final answer." And it's locked in at that point. And then afterwards, if when the answer pops up and it's, whoever, not Michael Jackson, Tito, yeah. If it's Tito, then you can't go, "Oh, wait, I meant Tito. It's too late. You've locked in your answer. Well, Jesus says it the same way. Like, the Lord wants to know, is Jesus your final answer? And you lock that in. And if you say, well, and to say I don't know or I'm not sure, that's in essence locking it in. Because when he appears, it's too late. You can't go, "Oh, wait, I really believe in Jesus. I really believe in Jesus. I really believe it's all real. It's all real. I'm ready to give my life to Jesus now." It's too late. You've already locked in your decision at that point. And so we have to be ready, and we have to lock in that decision before He comes. And we have to have the lamp already lit for the Master's return. Now, I told you we would come back to this, and here we are back at it. This little twist that we talked about where the Master, when He returns and He finds His servants waiting for Him, watching for Him, they welcome Him back into the home. They open the door for Him. It says then that He girds Himself and serves them. And we talked about how that was an interesting little plot twist there. What is this most likely referring to? You think it's the cross? Okay. But, okay. What were you going to say, Dottie? You don't know? So, he did service, and he did wash his disciples' feet, did he not? I would tend to agree with that, except for the fact that this is talking about the return. This is talking about the second coming of Christ. So that was all stuff that was done in the first coming. How would it relate to the second coming? Do what? True. Go ahead, you want to say it. I thought you were going there. Nobody wants. No, I figured this would be one of the first things people jumped on. Oh, we're dancing all around it. The wedding supper, yeah. Did y'all ever study about that? So in Revelation chapter 19, verses 5 through 9, I guess we can read that. It's not a long passage. And I don't necessarily want to go to seed on it tonight, but I do think that that's probably what's being referenced here. In Revelation chapter 19, beginning with verse 5, John says, "Then a voice came from the throne saying, 'Praise our God, all you his servants and those who fear him, both small and great.' And I heard, as it were, the voice of a great multitude, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of mighty thundering, saying, 'Alleluia, for the Lord God omnipotent reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready.'" Now, who's his wife? Church, right. "And to her it was granted to be arrayed in fine linen, clean and bright, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Then he said to me, 'Write, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb.' And he said to me, 'These are true sayings of God.'" And I could have read on, but that's just a good picture of it. So, I don't know that it's talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb, but it makes sense, particularly since Jesus uses in his parable the idea of the master being away at a wedding, and then he comes back, and it would be customary for the groom to come back and retrieve the bride. Then you would have the marriage between the groom and the bride, and then you would have the marriage feast, the celebration feast, if you will. So that seems to be the image that he's playing on here. And of course, if we, the church, are the bride of Christ, then he's coming back to get us, and our marriage to Jesus, our groom, will be consummated, and the celebration will be this marriage supper of the Lamb in heaven. That's a very, very, very simplified version of that, but that's basically how it shakes out. Questions on those verses? All right. Have I blown your mind tonight? It's really pretty simple parable. It's just some nuances that give it maybe a little more complicated stuff. Not really complicated, but things to think about. So I'll give you a couple of application questions as usual to wrap up tonight. Off Their Rocker Community Church. Ever seen that church? Ever been there? Off Their Rocker Community Church is having a prophecy seminar next week. Their guest speaker has just authored a book titled "Jesus Returns" in October 2026. It's always October. Have you noticed that? Like every prophecy about the return of Christ, it's always October. I don't know why, unless it's. I think that's when the Feast of Trumpets, and maybe they're thinking it's tied some way to that. I don't know. Anyway, it's always October. Jesus returns in October of 2026. Will you be attending the seminar? So, When I was pastor in Southeast Texas, we did a mission trip to Whitehall, New York, which is it's upstate New York. It's very pretty country. But one day, free day, we were looking for something to do, and the pastor of that church, he said, well, have you ever heard of Ascension Rock? I'm like, no, not really. Is that like Schoolhouse Rock? I mean, like, what is it? And he's like, no, it's this place. So he took us out here to this place, and apparently the story goes, in 1844, a minister, and I use that term very, very loosely, I guess, was convinced that Jesus was returning in October of 1844. October 22nd of 1844, to be exact. And so he starts, a few months before that. You always got to start a little ways out so you can kind of build up the hype. Like you don't start and say, Jesus is coming back tomorrow. It can't be too far out because you got to be able to sell your books, right? So it's always like 6 months, a year or something out. But he's convinced, he's studied the prophecies of Daniel, and he's figured out that Jesus is coming back in October 22nd of 1844. And so he convinces all these followers of his, sell all their possessions. And there's this outcropping around Whitehall, New York. And it's on the side of a hill, and it's this giant white rock cliff thing that is this outcropping that shoots out over this gorge of a thing. And so they sold all their possessions. They gave it all away because they weren't going to be needed. They were going to need it. Jesus was coming back. They were going to be raptured out. We'll leave all our possessions to the people that get left behind, right? And so they put on white robes, and they start early that morning of the 22nd of October, and they start singing, hymns to the Lord, and they're waiting, and they're so happy because Jesus is coming back today. And noon came, and Jesus didn't come, and 2 o'clock came, and Jesus didn't come. They didn't give up hope. Jesus is coming. 5 o'clock in the evening, as the twilight is coming, Jesus is coming back. We know it is because Brother Miller says he's coming back today. And as the shadows of dusk turned into darkness, the sad reality began to sink in that Jesus isn't really coming back today. So what do? You sold everything. You followed this man that you believed was telling you the truth, and now you find yourself, I'm homeless, I'm penniless, I'm standing on the side of a cliff in a white robe waiting for somebody to come back that isn't coming back. Well, a lot of them just left. They not only left Warren Miller's church, they left religion altogether. They didn't want any part of it. It's kind of like the Chronicles of Narnia, the Last Battle, that book, The Last Battle. This ape finds this lion skin, and he puts it on. He pretends to be Aslan, the Christ figure. Well, then eventually he's found out that, this isn't really Aslan. This is some ape that's pretending to be Aslan. And you know what the people in the book said? I knew Aslan wasn't really real after all. And so these people that are standing on the side of the hill, when Jesus come back, they didn't say Warren Miller is a fake. What they said was, I knew Jesus wasn't really real after all. So a lot of them just walked away from religion altogether. They were disillusioned. There was a kernel of them that still wanted to believe. What happened? We've trusted Warren Miller so much. We believed his prophecies so much. How could it be wrong? Well, if you're Warren Miller and you're some of the leaders of that movement, what do? You can't just say, I'm sorry, guys, I guess I was wrong. So you have to make up a story as to why Jesus didn't really come back. So here's what he did, and some of the leaders of that movement. I hope I don't offend anybody tonight, but I'm just going to tell you, because this is the truth of what really happened. They said, in order to try to keep the group together, they said, Jesus really did come back, but when he come back, he found his church not really doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't ready. they weren't. And by ready, in his reckoning, it was they weren't keeping the Sabbath. They weren't keeping the Old Testament law. They weren't following the Ten Commandments. They weren't doing all of this religious ritualism that the Old Testament prescribes. And so Jesus really did come back, but he wasn't ready, and so he left. He didn't even stick around. He was so disgusted with the church that he just left until they can get it right. And so what the church needs to do is to start getting right, getting ready. And by getting ready, they mean keep, worship on the Sabbath, keep the Sabbath holy, keep the Ten Commandments, keep the dietary laws, don't eat catfish and pork sausage and all those stuff. Do all of those Old Testament Jewish laws, keep all that, so that when Jesus comes back again, he won't leave again. And now here's what will let you win the next Bible trivia contest you're in. That little group that spun out of Warren Miller's false prophecy later became the Seventh-day Adventist. And now, in the words of Paul Harvey, that's the rest of the story. But yeah, it's a real deal. So look, and Jesus said, if somebody says, oh, look, Jesus is over here or Jesus is over there, don't believe it. When he comes back, you're going to know it. I think that's pretty clearly that's what he says. Like lightning that shines from the east, comes in the east and shines to the west, you're going to know it. But nobody knows when. So the secret, the key is not to try to figure out when Jesus is coming back, but to be ready whenever Jesus comes back. So here's your last question. Do you expect Jesus to come back tonight? Okay, be honest with me. Do you really expect Jesus to come back tonight? All right. But the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So while it may or may not be tonight, it will be a night very much like this night, a night you least expected. When I was in school, I think I told this story before. When I was in school, I had this kid, his name was Greg. I won't tell you his last name. I doubt he watches my YouTube feed, but he may be stalking me. I don't know. But anyway, he would just like pick on me like all the time. I think we were like freshmen in high school or something. And he'd sit right behind me. He'd thump me on the ear, or something. He'd just mess with me. And finally, I would get so perturbed, so fed up with it that I would retaliate in some way. And I usually didn't end up in a fist fight because he was a lot bigger than me, and it was it was sort of a losing proposition for me to, start swinging. But I would find my ways to retaliate, and it'd burn him up, because he was supposed to pick on me. I wasn't supposed to pick on him, and he would look at me and go, "One of these days, Mark, I'm going to get you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I'm going to get you. When you least expect it, expect it." That's what he would always say. When you least expect it, expect it. So I kind of, every once in a while now, I'll hear something, rustle of leaves behind me, and I'll think maybe it's Greg coming to enact his vengeance on me, I think that's what Jesus is saying. When you least expect it. Maybe it's not today, maybe it's not tomorrow, but at a time when you least expect it, that's when you expect it. Do you expect Jesus to come back tonight? No. Brother Mark, do you expect Jesus to come back tonight? Not really. But the Son of Man is coming at his hour when we don't expect. So if it's not tonight, it will be a night just like tonight. And what's the message here? I need to have the lights on and my clothes on and be ready to answer the door when Jesus comes knocking. Because once he appears, there won't be time to get ready then. Every decision will already be locked in at that point. I've already made my decision. I choose Jesus, and that's my final answer. Questions or comments? I better hush. I'll sound like a Baptist preacher if I keep going much longer. All right. I've enjoyed studying with you tonight. Let's Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the promise of a soon coming King. God, I pray that you would help each of us to be ready for the Master's return, whether that's tonight or another 2,000 years from now, that we live every day like today would be the day. God, we love you, and we pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.